Holland, and now Canada, seeking to ruin their farmers. What is going on? Hey everybody, so good to be back with you. We are coming back off of a 1 week timeout. More on that in just a second, which is why I am titling this episode, Things I Can Safely Say on YouTube. We'll talk about what happened there in just a second, but we did get a strike and we were out of commission for a week, so we gotta watch our words going from here on out. Now, this is what I want to talk to you about today. What is this war on farmers all about? What is going on? We're going to look at this, give you some context, help you understand what this thing is. By the way, if you have not been hearing about this, that's because your media is failing you. This is really extraordinary what's going on in the world and how serious these farmers are about defending their livelihoods. And of course, the first thing the media does with things like this is they suppress that information. They don't really talk about it. It's kind of awkward. Makes the ruling leaders look bad and they get all their money from them. So that's how that all connects. Trudeau, look at this up there in yellow. Trudeau has decided to move forward with his cap on nitrogen emissions by reducing fertilizer use, even as provincial agricultural ministers beg him to stop. There's the link down there. Let's look at this real quick. But first, as a reminder, being hungry is not cool. There are only 9 meals between mankind and anarchy, according to Alfred Henry Lewis, 1906. He said that. So let's look at Trudeau's climate emergency that's driving this right now. Let me get my handy dandy drawing tool out here first. Move this over a tiny bit. Get this out. All right. So what we got here in yellow, as per a government of Saskatchewan news release, both Alberta and Saskatchewan ministers of agriculture have expressed profound disappointment in Trudeau's decision to attempt to reduce nitrogen emissions from fertilizer. We're really concerned with this arbitrary goal, Saskatchewan Minister of Agriculture David Merritt said. The Trudeau government has apparently moved on from their attack on the oil and gas industry and set their sights on Saskatchewan farmers, end quote. Wow, sounds a lot like Biden in the United States, attacking the people who are most responsible for filling out the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs for you. That's your shelter, your food, your water, your warmth. What is with attacking the people who provide those things? It's a mystery to me. At any rate, the agriculture minister for Alberta said, quote, "This has been the most expensive crop anyone has put in. Following a very difficult year on the prairies, the world is looking for Canada to increase production and be a solution to global food shortages. The federal government needs to display that they understand this. They owe it to our producers and to the citizens in the whole rest of the world." In purple down below, as previously reported by the Countersignal in December of 2020, the Trudeau government unveiled their new climate plan with a focus on reducing nitrous oxide emissions from fertilizer by 30% below 2020 levels by 2030. So that's pretty fast. That's just a 10-year level. And, well, it's already 2022 late. It's plastic season. It's like just 7 more years. That plan is now coming into effect, though the government refuses to acknowledge that nitrous oxide emissions can be reduced without drastically reducing fertilizer use and thus crop production, end quote. What is going on here? Who wants to reduce fertilizers at this point in time? By the way, a lot of things you could do if you wanted to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is something that you say you're concerned with. Obviously, in the United States, we have John Kerry, private jetting all over the world to tell people how important it is for you to take cold showers and for you to maybe eat, not meat or something like that. But look at this. Like, this is crazy time, right? So here we are. This was in the news just recently. I don't know if you saw it. Get rid of this. I find it distracting. Missed it. Yeah, Kylie Jenner's 17-minute private jet trip is a climate disaster. She's hardly the only 1%er flying private. Took a jet to go for 17 minutes. It would have been like a 40-minute car ride or something like that. Can't do that, right? So meanwhile, we're seeing here that jet set private plane usage has soared of late, right? As a result here, last year there were 3.3 million private flights around the world, the most on record. This is 7% higher than the previous high set in 2019, with US and Europe leading that growth. And by the way, a quick search of the news finds out that Trudeau has said nothing about private jets and their impact on climate change. Of course he didn't. In fact, he's been criticized heavily. So he used, Prime Minister used the jet for family vacations, emitting as much CO2 as a family might in an entire year just to take that trip. So why is it that we see this over again and over again and over again, this behavior where Team Elite, Trudeau representing that team, says, you know, of all the things we could do about climate change, we got to get the fertilizer down. Let's get the fertilizer use down. We don't know anything about farming, and all our agricultural ministers are screaming at us, but let's do that. We're not going to say anything about those private jets because, you know, my friends fly them, I fly them. Be a little awkward if I had to say something about that. So, gosh, might expose my hypocrisy. So instead, let's go after farmers. Okay, now this is a really awkward time to be going after farmers. Why? Look at these food prices. And this is just extraordinary what's happening with food prices around the world. A lot of this is due to shortages as well. We have the whole situation in Ukraine going on. We have really bad harvests coming in a bunch of places, and we still don't know the overall impact of what's going to happen because fertilizer use was heavily reduced already by farmers just due to prices, because we saw, as I've been presenting on this program for many months, fertilizer went up explosively in price this year due to natural gas input feedstocks, due to supply chain disruptions for phosphates and potassium, stuff like that. So that's where we are. By the way, I thought Ethical Skeptic on Twitter put it pretty well, the second wave. Let's make sure, let's not do that. I mean, we wouldn't want that, would we? I mean, we should be doing everything possible to encourage farmers right now to do everything they can to increase their production, not at this particular moment saying, you know, now would be a great time to just bring down the climate change law on this subsector of everything. And by the way, let's talk about this real quick. And first up, before we go there, I did mention we did get censored, meaning we had an informed consent, which is a live cast episode that Evie and I had done a number of weeks ago. That one got labeled as misinformation and it was taken down, but we got a warning off of that. And then the very next episode, oh, and by the way, if you ever want to follow us and you want to make sure that you don't miss something because we've been censored, and I don't know, someday we may just find this channel taken down completely. It could happen. To avoid losing out on following me, come on over to peakprosperity.com. We got a great tribe of people there. We'd love to have you. We've got a variety of memberships, Peak Insider, our most popular one there. Then, reason I wasn't on last week is because we actually got a strike. That means no content for a week. Bad boy, you're in timeout. They put us on the stairs and we had to sit there for a whole week. And this too was for medical misinformation. And this one was actually, the title of this one was Farmer Rebellion, but we did cover some of the things that I don't even know if I can say. The director of the National Institute of Infectious Disease and Allergy, I don't even know if I can say the name. I don't know what I can say and can't say anymore. I don't know. Other people seem to be able to talk about these things. This channel seems to have a target on it. We talked about a few things. I reviewed the transcript. There's nothing in there that isn't already part of the official record, but somehow it's medical misinformation when it's coming from this mouth versus a lot of other ones. So, hey, if you don't want to miss out on this channel, and by the way, if we ever just go dark, it's not because I'm not producing content. Come on by Peak Prosperity. You'll always find me there. I'm always doing stuff. Here's how you follow me. Take a screenshot up top, peakprosperity.com. There's the membership link. You can follow me on Twitter at Chris Martinson. Also, I'm increasingly going to be putting my stuff on a platform called sovereign.media. That's like google.com.media, sovereign.media. That is Ben Swan's amazing platform he's building. Going to be censor-proof. I'm putting a lot behind that one. I actually really enjoy it a lot. You'll see more about that coming up. Odyssey, Rumble, Chris_Martinson in both cases. You can find me there as well. All right. But remember, when it comes to the whole pharma thing, the Dutch government did this first, right? And so what was going on? Why did the Dutch government, and by the way, that's still ongoing, the Dutch farmers are very unhappy. They understand this is existential. They are not backing down because if they lose this battle, they lose their farms, they lose their livelihoods, and they also know that the government's going to do a really poor job of running this whole thing just based on what they know about the government. All right. So what is it all about? It's about this thing, which is a plan that's likely going to force farmers to cut their livestock herds or stop work altogether. In many cases, if you have to cut your herd, you're no longer efficient, you can't operate, or you don't have enough profits, you're out. So they're going to have to cut not just fertilizer use, but their farm stock animal herds. Why? because, quote, the government says emissions of nitrogen oxide, or nitrous oxide, I think they're trying to say, and ammonia, which livestock produced, must be drastically reduced close to nature areas that are part of a network of protected habitats for endangered plants and wildlife stretching across the 27-nation European Union. Quote, freedom of speech and the right to demonstrate are a vital part of our democratic society, and I will always defend them, Mark Rutte said, the leader over there in Holland. But it's not acceptable to create dangerous situations. It is not acceptable to intimidate officials. We will never accept that. Pro tip, whenever somebody's saying something and they use the word but, you can ignore everything they said prior to the but. It's irrelevant. It's meaningless. So when he said here, freedom of speech, right to demonstrate are a vital part of democratic society, I will always defend them, but you can throw all that out. It doesn't count. Whoop, out the window. What he's really saying and what he wants to say is it's not acceptable to create dangerous situations. It's not acceptable to intimidate officials. We will never accept that. What he didn't say is that's for us to do to you. Our police will intimidate the citizens. Government will intimidate the citizens because, of course, Mark Rutte stands for tyranny. Tyranny is when the people fear the government. Liberty is when the government fears the people. We're a little out of balance in that whole thing. Mark Rutte explaining that perfectly, so thank you for that. But, all right, what is the government proposing in green? Quote, the ruling coalition wants to cut emissions of pollutants, predominantly nitrogen oxide and ammonia, by 50% nationwide by 2030. Ministers call the proposal an unavoidable transition. It aims to improve air, land, and water quality. Unavoidable. It's a done deal. It's inevitable. That's always what tyrannical governments want, to make things seem like it's just inevitable. Hey, you won't have any privacy. You just have supposed to shrug and go, oh, I guess that was inevitable, right? It's just how they want to make it seem. So when we look at this here, they're saying ministers call the proposal an unavoidable transition. Unavoidable. It's going to happen. All right. So Russell Brand, he, a number of weeks ago, said that this, there's a theory out there going on that this is actually a move to bankrupt farmers so that their land can be grabbed, can be purchased by other players out there in the world. This is an idea, whether it's true or not, is beginning to circulate widely, and this is going to create a lot of hardened resistance amongst groups of people who are pushing back. So if you want to know what the farmer mindset is, it's a little bit like this. The WF has revealed plans to buy up farmland from Dutch farmers who are bankrupted by climate change policies. Ta-da! This was never about climate change, only societal change, eyes wide open. All right, but let's look at this now a little bit more closely. It turns out, and this is according to the US EPA, that in 2020, nitrous oxide, which is N2O, two nitrogen atoms and an oxygen, N2O, accounted for about 7% of all US greenhouse gas emissions from human activities. Human activities such as agriculture, fuel, combustion, wastewater management, blah, 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 blah. 7%? It means 93% had nothing to do with this. So, how would you reduce that? Well, examples they helpfully gave for how to reduce nitrous oxide emissions would be the application of nitrogen fertilizer accounts for the majority of N2O emissions, so those emissions can be reduced by reducing nitrogen-based fertilizers. By the way, nitrogen-based fertilizers are responsible for most of the yields in the world. If we took nitrogen-based fertilizers out of the equation, yields across the world would probably fall 30%, mass starvation, famine, horrible. Now, they're not saying we have to stop it by 100%, but they are saying 50% cuts in fertilizer use. You do the math. It's not really good. All right, so is this really the place where isn't this kind of a strange place to drop the climate change hammer? Like, let's start somewhere. Let's show we're serious. Let's begin with farms and their nitrous oxide. Okay, but let's do a little math on this. So by the numbers, Canadian GHG emissions, here's the link down here. Apparently, according to this, Canada's greenhouse gas emissions currently represent 1.6% of the global total. So this is all their global greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, something like that. So let's run some numbers. Let's say that Canada's 1.6%. That's 0.16. And let's say that's 7% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a 0.07. and we multiply that by, let's say they want to cut it by half by 2030. Okay, that means that we get a number that looks like this, which means if Canada successfully cuts half their fertilizer use, they will dent climate change emissions by 0.056%. 0.056% reminds me of the survival of something. Survival factor. I can't say what. Not anymore. Come by Peak Prosperity if you want to hear the rest of what I really think about things. But really, we're gonna risk putting farmers out of business. We're gonna risk alienating them. We're gonna risk talking to the farmers as if they're going to get the message that they don't matter, that we don't care about them, whatever the we is in the story from the government side. We're going to do all of that in order to be able to trim global climate change emissions by 0.056%. Well, let's take another look. Let's just some context in here. So in terms of the overall contribution, at least according to the United States, that's a very flat trend. Not a lot. From 1990 to current, the United States has been releasing about the same amount of nitrous oxide. Now, I don't know if that's true for Canada as well, but I just thought, here's some data I had. So this isn't screaming super emergency, but this has been kind of how it's been for decades and decades. In fact, in the United States, carbon dioxide emissions also kind of flat over time. This is total metric tons, millions of metric tons. So, okay. But CO2 is definitely going up a lot, and I'm wondering who could be responsible for that. Who could be responsible for that? On the left, way over there, China. Look at the growth in China. That's just extraordinary. Then the United States kind of hanging flat over time. India coming way up. Look at that, right? And then Germany, then Mexico, then Australia, then Canada, way over there on the side. And if Canada does what it says it's going to do, those little sets of bars take us out to their 2030 targets, is that bright green on the far side over there. That's what Canada is decided is important, that it risks its farming and farming community for, is to achieve that set of bars over there on the right side. When, hear me out, you could also potentially come forward and maybe criticize China just a tiny bit here, or have a word or two about India, or maybe talk about private jets. Justin Trudeau is dead silent on all of those things. In the case of the dog that did not bark in Sherlock Holmes, there's something wrong with what Justin Trudeau is not saying in this story. I hear what he's saying. We have to bring the hammer down on farmers, right? Okay, farmers in Canada, listen up. This is it. You watched what happened to your truckers up there. This is it. You can't give in on this thing. Like, this is not, obviously, by the numbers, Justin Trudeau isn't doing this to save 0.056% of global greenhouse gas emissions when China's slathering on like 5% more every year. No, it's not what it's about. It's about something else. This is what we increasingly have to talk about. This is what I am talking about back over at Peak Prosperity, because this is now enemy action. We have to face up to this. It's time to admit the worst to ourselves. If you want to come in and find out about that, this is going to be members only. There's a lot of stuff I no longer can talk about in private, because obviously I got a set of spotlights on this channel. I hope I didn't push the bar too far today, but if I did, hey, you can always find me over at Peak Prosperity. That's all I have for you today. See you next time. Bye.